Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm painting another from my 5-minute landscape series. This is all about loose watercolour practice for loose watercolour landscapes, and it's not about the speed of painting, it's about trying to get into the habit of making every brush stroke count. This will result in a fresh looking painting, something that doesn't look muddy or overworked. So let's begin. First things first, my pencil sketch. So I'm putting in a really loose outline of a few mountain shapes in the lower third or lower quarter of the painting, because this painting is going to be all about the sky, but the mountains will be the sort of setting for that stormy sky. So here's the drawing, and you can see it's just a few scribbly lines, and that gives me my guidelines when I paint. I'm using Milford cold press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board and with ordinary decorator's masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. The first thing I'm going to do is take my large wash brush. This is a Princeton Aqua Elite Mottler brush, but any large wash brush that you're happy using will do. And I'm practicing painting my sky. You can see that I'm scrubbing the water into the sky area, leaving some areas dry and wetting others. This will be so that I can, when I paint in my lovely rich tube consistency watercolour paint, I'll get some soft and hard edges. This is Payne's Grey with a touch of dioxazine violet. You can see I'm painting it really richly and thickly across the sky area, with sort of no tentative brush strokes or anything. And once I've got that big shape in, then I'm sort of dipping my brush into the water, drying it off, and then using that little bit of water on the damp brush to spread the clouds out so I get some thinner, lighter value paint here and there. Making sure I keep plenty of white paper. That gives me my cloud shapes along with my cloud shadows, and I get this really deep, brooding sky. And it's trusting the process here, not fiddling too much. Put the paint on the page and then leave it, just maybe soften around some edges. And now I've dipped into my Payne's Grey and some sepia and a little bit of indigo, and I'm just going over my pencil outline of my mountains. Just putting in the edges, keeping the paint really rich, really thick, so that's just a sort of a silhouetted backdrop of the mountains. Dragging the brush across for some dry brush, that gives me a foreground. Really simple, minimal brushwork. So just sweeping that same mountain colour across the foreground gives me the foreground in just a few brush strokes. It's just creating that suggestion of detail. Now what I want to do is soften off the transition between the lower part of those mountains and turn it into a layer of mist. So for this I'm using a clean, damp oval wash brush. Any soft wash brush will do, and I'm softening off that edge with a bit of water, and that gives the impression of mist. Still keeping plenty of unpainted paper in this impression of a storm over the mountains. And notice that I've only used 2 brushes for this. My large wash brush, my Mottler brush, or you could use a Harkey brush or a large squirrel mop, has done just about all the work, and the small oval wash brush has been used to sort of soften off some edges to create that misty look. And I'm going to use the oval wash brush just to soften a few parts of the sky. If you're going to soften a sky that's in the process of drying like this, make sure that your brush is almost dry. Remove any excess moisture with a tissue or a paper towel before you go into a drying sky like this. If you use a wetter mix and try to adjust your sky, you'll create cauliflower marks where the wet mix will push into the drying paint. So be very careful if you try to soften back any edges when the sky is nearly dry like this. And I think I'm more or less happy with this. I can see that as it finishes drying and diffusing, it will look the way I want it to. I'm just going to see if I can get a bit of texture across the tops of the mountains. So I'm using my palette knife to scrape through the drying paint on the mountains. And while there's not a lot of wet paint there left, because it's mostly dried now, I can still get a bit of sort of textural difference, which gives that sort of look of strata on those distant mountain tops. Let's try on that other side, but that's even drier, so there's not really much effect. So I'm now going to lay my board flat and leave the painting to dry completely, and we'll come back then and have a look at it and see how it looks. So here's the dry painting. It's a little bit richer and darker because the light in my studio is sort of bleaching things out a little bit. But I'm going to remove the tape, and if you can see here, I'm removing a layer of tape next to the painting, but there's still a layer of masking tape attaching the painting to the board. Now I double mask my paintings that I'm doing for demos like this so that I can remove the tape and show you the finished painting, but while still keeping the painting stretched onto the board, so that I can then leave it overnight so that it fully dries and will flatten out completely. And so you can see there's that layer of tape that's still left there, but we can still see how the painting looks with a clean white border. And if we just zoom in a little bit, I'm hoping that you can see how those very minimal brush strokes across the foreground have created that sort of dry brush sparkle, the really thick, rich paint, but the sweep of the brush with single brush strokes, that minimal work there has created the foreground and just suggested it, and then where I left the unpainted white paper and then softened the transition between the distant mountains and the foreground, that's given us that layer of mist. So just before I give beginners a bit of really important information, a quick plug for my book, Landscapes in Watercolour. I hope that if you haven't seen my book, that you'll take a look by following the links below. There are 10 tutorials here, some line and wash paintings and some pure watercolours that I hope you'll find really useful. So now back to this painting. I've had a few beginners recently being a little bit grumpy with me, saying that they tried this and it turned out to be a mess, and so it's not a painting that's suitable for beginners. Well, I beg to differ with that. This is a technique that takes practice, it takes time and it takes confidence. And while it is definitely suitable for beginners, because I advocate beginners really throw themselves in at the deep end and try these sky practices with big brushes and loose brushwork, it can take a little bit of a while to get used to it. Like anything that's worth learning, it's worth doing it properly, and the best way to learn is through trial and error. So please do try this out, beginners, with your big brushes and plenty of paint. And it certainly is beginner friendly, but you may not get it first time, but be prepared for that. But be prepared to work out what went wrong, because these exercises are the kind of things that will really help you to make progress if you're determined to learn. So I'm afraid if you're looking for a simple step-by-step tutorial that will work out perfectly every time, then my demos aren't for you. But I'm hoping that those of you that really want to learn loose watercolour painting will find my demos inspiring and challenging, even if they don't work out first time necessarily. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you'd like to support the channel, then we have links to our Patreon pages, which you can find below, along with a link to my book, if you're interested in taking a look. So many thanks. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.